My dad pays me more because I'm really important here. You're just a background. Try working for a day without using your father's last name. I want to see if the company can still remember your name.
My monitor flickered once, just enough to feel wrong before a spreadsheet snapped open on its own, bright and unforgiving. A single glance at the numbers felt like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. 4 salary entries, and one name glowing like a bad punchline: Connor Marlowe. The CEO's 24-year-old son, who still confused ISO standards with Wi-Fi settings. His starting salary was so shockingly high, my first instinct was to check whether my glasses had smudged. 65% more than me. 19 years of service. And I was being outranked financially by a kid who still asked where the office staplers lived. And if you've ever had a moment that made you question your entire career in one breath, you know exactly how this feels. Before we go deeper into this mess, tell me, where are you listening from right now? By the way, I have to mention this with a slightly broken heart. About 95% of you are listening, but still haven't subscribed. If you hit that subscribe button, you'll get every twist, every reveal, and every delicious moment of corporate karma the second it drops. Trust me, your future self will thank you for it. For a long moment, I just stared. Then stared harder. I even clicked the cell, half expecting a stray decimal to magically appear, but no, SilverGate medical systems hadn't made a mistake. They'd made a statement, and the Chom BM rose in me fast. Great. Brady, maybe HR decided to put your self-worth on clearance this year. Once the initial shock burned off, something colder settled in. A steadiness, a clarity I didn't want but couldn't shake. I'd spent nearly 2 decades building compliance systems, saving this company from at least 3 FDA disasters, and training analysts who now outranked me. Meanwhile, Connor had once asked me if sterility was a software feature. I took the printout straight to HR, gripping it like evidence from a crime scene. Hannah Pierce, our HR director with a talent for sounding inconvenienced by human emotion, didn't even blink. "Market conditions shift," she said, voice sweet as cardboard. "And you, well, you're from an older pay band." Older pay band? As if I'd arrived at SilverGate via time machine. I pressed for answers. She smiled, a thin, brittle smile, one that didn't reach her eyes, and tapped her pen as if rehearsing Brady. Be realistic. New talent comes at a premium. But beneath her calm facade was something off, a flicker, a hesitation she tried to bury. That tiny crack told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an accident. This was a cover-up, and just like that, the shock inside me crystallized into something colder, sharper, something ready to cut through the truth they thought I'd never see. When I finally made it home that evening, the silence hit harder than the spreadsheet ever did. My living room looked exactly the same, nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, but somehow everything felt out of place. I sat down in the middle of the carpet, surrounded by 19 years of corporate souvenirs laid out like exhibits in a museum service plaques. Old SilverGate lanyards, FDA audit commendations, and the blueprint sketches of the compliance workflow I built from scratch. For a moment, it almost looked impressive. Then reality caught up, and all of it felt like props from a very long, very unfunny joke. I picked up a framed award from a decade ago, remembering the night I earned it. I'd stayed in the lab until 3 a.m. because leadership forgot to hire a replacement for a departing analyst. Back then, I'd told myself it was dedication. Now, it sounded more like free labor with a fancy title. Another memory hit me, scrambling to patch data discrepancies right before an FDA inspection while my department head paced behind me. Sweating bullets. He got the praise, I got the privilege of doing his job for him. Thinking back, even I wanted to shake my younger self and ask, "Brady, were you trying to win a medal in unpaid heroics?" The more I replayed those moments, the more ridiculous my own loyalty felt. Not painful, just sharply embarrassing. Like rereading old emails where I sounded too eager, too grateful, too willing to bleed for people who couldn't remember my birthday, much less my contributions. I leaned back against the couch, letting that sting settle. It didn't burn like betrayal. It settled like a slow, bitter acceptance. That's when I opened my laptop, not out of anger, but out of habit. I typed a few keywords into the internal email archive search bar, half expecting nothing. Instead, a thread I didn't recognize appeared. The subject line was simple, almost boring: retention cost strategy. And just like that, the air shifted. The emails were old years old, but brutally clear. A former CFO had advised keeping long-tenured employees at minimal salary adjustments due to strong emotional investment and low turnover risk. HR had replied with enthusiasm, calling veteran staff cost-efficient long-term assets. It wasn't incompetence, it wasn't oversight, it was policy. I stared at the screen, my heartbeat steadying into something cold, not angry, not devastated, just awake, after 19 years of going above and beyond. I wasn't a valued expert. I was a durable product, a reliable appliance they assumed would never break down or walk away. They didn't see me as loyal. They saw me as long-lasting, and for the first time. I felt my self-respect finally stand up, dust itself off, and say, then maybe it's time to stop being their favorite piece of equipment by the next morning. The disbelief still clung to me like static. No matter how many times I replayed those archived emails in my head, something kept whispering that maybe there was more I hadn't seen. That uneasy thought pushed me to text the only person in the company I trusted to confirm the truth, Marcus Hill, our longtime IT manager. If anyone knew what Silvergate was hiding behind pleasant slogans and annual pizza parties, it was him. We met at a quiet corner table in Harbor Brew Cafe, the kind of place where the coffee was strong enough to burn a hole through your doubts. Marcus arrived wearing the same weary look he'd had for the last few years, like he'd aged a decade for every system outage leadership refused to fund. He set his mug down, slid into the chair, and gave me a long, knowing sigh. You found something, didn't you? That obvious, I asked. Brady, he said, leaning closer, after 19 years, everything's obvious on your face. I pulled out my laptop, opened the archived emails, and let him read. His jaw tightened. Not with shock. Marcus rarely got shocked, but with the kind of anger a tired man carries quietly. Yeah, he muttered. I've suspected something like this for a long time. I blinked. You have. He nodded. I found a flaw in Silvergate's compensation tracking system years ago. Harmless at the time. But lately, I've been seeing patterns that don't add up. New hires jumping salary bands, legacy employees being frozen out. He paused, then added with a humorless smirk. And guess who built half the access controls they never bothered fixing for a moment? My doubt twisted into something sharper. Marcus, are you telling me they've been underpaying pretty much everyone with tenure? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out his tablet and opened a diagnostic tool I'd never seen before, something clearly not meant for regular employees to access. I can legally run bandwidth allocation checks, he explained calmly, which includes salary-linked resource loads. It's not hacking, it's auditing. Meaning, he said. I can pull a comparative report without crossing any lines. Something in me steadied. The fog of uncertainty thinned just enough to let the first hint of clarity through. Marcus, would you do that for me? For you, sure, he replied. But not just for you. For everyone who's been carrying this place while watching the CEO hand out inflated salaries like party favors. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the espresso machine filling the space between us. Then Marcus leaned in again, voice lower. Brady, I've already seen a preview of what the numbers might look like. And his expression darkened. The pay gap isn't 65% for some veteran employees. It's worse, much worse. A chill slid down my spine, not fear this time, but recognition. My doubts weren't paranoia. They were pointing me toward the truth I'd been too loyal, too trusting, too tired to see. And with Marcus sitting across from me. The path forward finally began to sharpen into focus when Marcus finally sent me the file later that evening. I told myself I was ready for it. After all, I'd already seen enough to know Silvergate had been playing us for years. But the moment I opened the report, the shock hit me so hard, it felt physical, like someone had taken a cold hand and pressed it straight against my ribs. The numbers were brutal. Every employee with more than 8 years of service technical specialists, lab analysts, quality leads, even supervisors was being paid 30 to 45% below market rate. People who had carried the heaviest workloads, kept Silvergate compliant, and babysat every crisis the executive team couldn't handle had all been quietly pushed down the salary ladder. It wasn't a glitch, it wasn't coincidence, it was systematic and calculated and disturbingly consistent. But then came the part that turned the shock into something darker. The new talent list. Right at the top was Connor Marlowe. The CEO's son, the same kid who still struggled to connect his laptop to the company network. Next to him were 3 friends he'd pulled in from whatever business club he'd stumbled out of in college. They all had inflated titles, inflated responsibilities, and salaries so high they looked like parody. No tenure, no accomplishments, no qualifications beyond having the right last name or knowing the right person. I stared at their compensation figures, feeling my pulse thump once, hard, before slowing into something dangerously calm. 19 years of loyalty. And my worth had been neatly placed somewhere below Connor's disastrous PowerPoint presentation. From his first week, the one so awful it made half the room question if he'd ever opened Excel before. Yet here he was, ranked and paid as if he were leading Silvergate's future. Meanwhile, the people who actually built that future were being financially punished for staying. The more I scrolled, the worse it got. There were employee profiles, missing key data, missing tenure fields, overwritten review histories, compensation summaries with chunks of information blacked out as if redacted for national security. Some files had been modified only days earlier, with timestamps pointing suspiciously to an HR workstation. I leaned closer, reading line by line, letting the shock dissolve into something colder and far more stable. These weren't clerical mistakes. Someone had been deliberately wiping or altering the historical records of long-term employees. It was too messy to be an accident and too consistent to be random. That subtle, quiet chill settled in my chest, an emotion without heat or panic, not sadness, not rage, something sharper, clarity. This wasn't just exploitation. It was preservation executive self-preservation at everyone else's expense. They weren't just underpaying us. They were burying any trail that proved they had done it for the first time in 19 years. I didn't feel confused or hurt. I felt steady. I felt certain. And most of all, I felt done. Monday morning felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a storm rearranges an entire coastline. I woke before sunrise without an alarm, not out of panic, but because my mind had already settled into a strange, steady clarity. After everything I'd uncovered, there was nothing left to second guess, no more circular doubts, no more excuses disguised as loyalty. Just a plan and the calmness that comes when you finally stop trying to protect a system that never protected you. The Silvergate parking lot was nearly empty when I pulled in. The building's automatic lights still glowed with that dim, early morning haze, casting long shadows down the hallway. I walked toward the top floor with a composure that surprised even me. Maybe it was because I had rehearsed this moment in my head so many times, or maybe I had simply run out of ways to care about how the company might spin the truth. Henry Marlowe's office door was unlocked, as it always was before 8. Executives loved pretending they were accessible. I stepped inside, breathing in the faint scent of expensive cedar polish, and placed a single sealed envelope right on the center of his immaculate desk. Inside was everything he never expected to face my resignation letter. The salary comparison charts Marcus and I pieced together, and a handwritten note I had rewritten 3 times until the message felt precise. Loyalty is not a discount code. I stood there for a moment, not with regret, but with the kind of peace that comes from saying something true for the first time in years. Then I walked out, quiet as a ghost, and headed back to my workstation. My badge still worked, my login still worked, my presence still went unnoticed. Silvergate had always assumed long-term employees made the least noise. Perfect. I powered on my computer, opened a new email, and typed out a careful, concise message addressed to exactly 63 people, the employees with more than 8 years of service, the ones the company had quietly discounted, underpaid, and labeled low risk. I attached the comparison charts, I attached the archived policy emails, I attached every piece of evidence they deserved to see. The subject line was simple. You should know the truth. My finger hovered above the send key for only a second. Then I pressed it. The email left my outbox with a soft whoosh, a sound far too gentle for the bomb it carried. I leaned back in my chair, letting the stillness wrap around me. No running, no hiding, no dramatic exit with a box of desk supplies. I wasn't leaving, not yet, because storms are best watched from the eye, where everything is quiet while the pressure builds. And I wanted to see exactly how Silvergate Medical Systems reacted when the truth finally reached the people it had underestimated the longest. The first sign that the email had landed came in the form of a single, distant ringtone, then another until the entire floor buzzed like a malfunctioning beehive. I watched from my desk as heads snapped up from monitors, chairs rolled back abruptly, and employees leaned toward each other with the kind of stunned urgency reserved for fire alarms. Whispering started first, then pointing, then full-on disbelief as more phones lit up at once, within minutes. The calm Monday morning dissolved into pure chaos. People were stepping into hallways, calling out names, shouting questions that no one could answer quickly enough. Is this real? How long has this been happening? Why didn't they tell us screens turned bright with attachments, my attachments opening on desktops across every department? I could practically feel the collective shockwave spreading floor by floor. Then came the anger. Sharp, rising, unified. I saw senior analysts cursing under their breath, supervisors shaking their heads in disbelief, and long-tenured employees pacing like they'd been personally robbed. In a way. They had years of dedication, loyalty, extra hours. They all now carried the sour aftertaste of betrayal. By 8:45. The situation had escalated far beyond chatter. Groups formed naturally, quality teams in one corner, engineers in another, operations staff blocking the hallway like a wall of outrage. Every cluster had the same glow of fury in their eyes. Even the calmest employees looked ready to flip a desk if given a good enough reason. That was when CEO Henry Marlowe made his move. A mass email hit everyone's inbox, mandatory all hands, meeting effective immediately, auditorium, his attempt at damage control. I walked with the growing crowd, blending in, unseen despite being the cause of the commotion when we entered the auditorium. Henry was already on stage with a microphone, flanked by HR Director Hannah Pierce, who looked like she'd aged 5 years in 10 minutes. Henry raised his hands for silence. He didn't get it. Everyone! Please, let's discuss this like professionals, he insisted, his voice tight, rehearsed, and shaking just slightly. But no one was listening. The moment he tried to open with the phrase, "We believe there has been a misunderstanding." The room erupted. Shouting ricocheted off the walls. There was no misunderstanding. You hit our salaries for years. You paid new hires more than veterans. Explain the email chain. Hannah tried stepping forward, but every attempt at deflection only fueled the rage. Everyone had the evidence in their inbox. There was no narrative to twist, no loophole to hide behind. And then, like a final insult tossed into a burning room, Connor Marlowe, the Golden Boy's son, appeared near the stage entrance, pale and sweating. Someone recognized him, and the crowd's anger narrowed with laser precision. Because Connor's inflated salary 65% above mine was sitting right at the top of the spreadsheet. He looked like a kid caught stealing candy, not a grown man with an executive-level paycheck. The panic on his face said everything he finally realized. He wasn't the star of a legacy team. He was the poster child of nepotistic excess. And as the shouting swelled around us, I sat quietly at the edge of the crowd, watching SilverGate Medical Systems ignite from the inside out. The fire had finally found its oxygen, if the auditorium had been chaos. What happened afterward was something far more deliberate, like watching the company flip from panic to hunting mode. I'd barely stepped out into the hallway when I overheard one of the junior managers whispering urgently into his phone. "Yes, sir, we're looking for him now." A beat of silence. Then the name dropped like a stone, Brady Wells. So that was it. I'd officially become SilverGate's most wanted. The shift was almost amusing. Hours earlier, they barely remembered half of us existed. Now the CEO wanted to speak with me personally, in corporate language. That meant only one thing: damage control cloaked as negotiation, or negotiation cloaked as intimidation. Depends on how desperate the CEO felt. I took the back staircase, blending into the shuffle of employees moving between floors. But every few steps, another snippet floated toward me. Find him. He can explain. He needs to come in voluntarily before legal escalates it. It would have been flattering if the stakes weren't so high. When I reached my desk, the real game began. My computer screen was flashing a warning banner. Access privileges under review. Contact it. Administrator. A second notification popped up immediately after that one. You have been signed out remotely. I let out a slow breath. So Henry had called it first. Typical. When power slips, go after the logins, cut the access, erase the problem. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Marcus had already shown me the flaw in SilverGate's archiving system, the one that preserved mirrored read-only access for any original file creator, no matter how many times their profile was modified. suspended, or accidentally deleted. And I'd created a lot of files over 19 years. I pulled my personal laptop from my bag, connected to the company guest network, and quietly opened the mirrored archive. Every document I'd ever written, every audit trail I'd ever generated, every compliance report I had authored, thousands of pages of institutional knowledge appeared at my fingertips. It was almost poetic. They had spent years undervaluing me, but couldn't function without the very work they refused to compensate. Then, as I browsed deeper, I found something I hadn't expected. Buried inside a restricted folder, one that shouldn't have mirrored to anyone, I discovered internal memos and executive review drafts tied directly to salary suppression policies. Notes from Henry himself, approving budget containment through strategic stagnation. Annotated spreadsheets where HR proposed freezing veteran raises for an additional 5 years. Even email drafts where Henry warned the board that overcompensating the old guard could jeopardize his expansion plans. They thought they were hiding these. The system thought otherwise. I copied the files to my encrypted drive, each transfer landing like a soft click of checkmate. By the time IT fully disabled my corporate credentials, every piece of evidence they feared most was already secured. That was when I heard footsteps at the end of the hallway. Firm, hurried, purposeful, security. SilverGate wasn't trying to talk, they were trying to corner, but thanks to Marcus, I was already 5 moves ahead. I didn't run when security started sweeping the floor. I didn't hide behind cubicles or slip out the back door the way they probably expected. Instead, I walked calmly toward the east exit, stepped outside, and let the cool air settle my thoughts. Panic was a luxury I no longer needed. I had the evidence, I had the truth, and for the first time in 19 years, SilverGate was the one scrambling, not me. My phone buzzed as I reached the parking lot. An unknown number. "Mr. Wells," a composed female voice said. "This is Rebecca Lynn, chair of the SilverGate Board of Directors. We request your presence for an urgent risk review meeting. Neutral location, 30 minutes, not a request, an instruction disguised as courtesy." I almost laughed. 30 minutes later, I sat in a private conference suite overlooking the river, one of those places where executives negotiated mergers, not mistakes. 3 board members walked in: Chairwoman Rebecca Lynn, Finance Director Alan Cray, and Risk and Compliance Advisor Dr. Miriam Holt. The empty seat at the far end told me exactly who wasn't showing up. Henry Marlowe, CEO, suddenly taken ill, translation hiding. Rebecca folded her hands. "Mr. Wells, we're aware of a situation. We need clarity. Clarity. A polite word for, tell us how bad this is before investors find out." I opened my folder and slid the documents across the table without drama. "You already know what this is. Salary suppression, record alterations, retention strategies built on financial punishment." My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. "I'm not here to negotiate or bargain. I'm here to tell you what needs to happen," Alan scoffed, already irritated. "And what exactly do you believe needs to happen?" I met his eyes. Full correction of all salaries to market rate. Retroactive back pay for all long-term employees. Transparent salary bands going forward. Public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Then, I added, because I wanted no misunderstandings and I'm not returning to the company. "This is not about reinstatement." Alan nearly choked. "Do you have any idea what that would cost us?" "Yes," I said calmly. "About the same as what you stole from us." Silence, heavy and brittle. Rebecca exhaled slowly, calculating the fallout. Dr. Holt studied me with an expression that wasn't anger, but something closer to respect. She finally spoke. "Mr. Wells, your findings align with patterns we've suspected but couldn't confirm. Your documentation is precise and, frankly, devastating." Then she slid a small notepad toward me, so subtly the others didn't notice, and whispered, "You're doing the right thing. Don't back down." A board ally. The twist I didn't expect. Rebecca straightened. "We will need time to review the financial impact." "You have until 4 o'clock, I replied. "After that, everything goes to the Department of Labor." Their faces blanched. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and gathered my folder. "SilverGate created this mess. I'm simply making sure you clean it up." For the first time all day, the board didn't argue. They just watched me leave quiet, pale, and painfully aware that the balance of power had shifted. And for once, I was the one in control. Walking out of that meeting felt like stepping into the center of a tightening wire, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. I had given the board a deadline 4 o'clock, not a recommendation, not a suggestion, a line in the sand they couldn't afford to ignore. And the moment I left the building, the tension began rippling through SilverGate like a silent alarm. I drove to a small cafe 2 blocks away, sat by the window with a black coffee, and watched the company I'd devoted 19 years to spiral into frantic motion. My phone buzzed nonstop screenshots of internal group chats, rumors spilling across departments, employees speculating about resignations, lawsuits, audits, even from a distance. I could feel the pressure inside those glass walls tightening with every passing minute. Around 1:30. The first news alert hit my phone. A business outlet had picked up whispers of a major internal compensation crisis at SilverGate Medical Systems. The article was vague, but damning enough to send investors into a mild panic. A second article followed 20 minutes later. By the third, there was no doubt someone inside the building was leaking details. I took a sip of my coffee and waited. Meanwhile, Henry Marlowe, who had spent the entire morning recovering from his sudden stomach ailment, finally resurfaced. According to the messages coming in from friends still inside the building, he was storming from office to office, shouting orders, demanding answers, insisting that the board put an end to this nonsense. But the beauty of panic is that it exposes power for what it actually is, not what people pretend it to be. By 2:15, the board had called an emergency executive session without inviting Henry. By 2:30, HR was instructed to disconnect Henry from all internal communication channels until further notice. And by 3 o'clock, the cafeteria rumor mill reported that Henry had been seen slamming his office door so hard the glass rattled. I should have felt anxious or guilty or vindictive. Instead, I felt calm. Every new message only confirmed what I already knew: the board had turned on its CEO the moment they realized he was more liability than leader. They weren't protecting him anymore. They were protecting the company from him. I leaned back in my chair, letting that reality settle, and the tension that had been coiled tight in my chest all day finally loosened, not completely, just enough for the corners of my mouth to curve into a dry, involuntary smile. SilverGate had spent 19 years treating long-term employees like disposable parts. Now, their own CEO had become the most disposable part of all. 4 o'clock was coming, and for once, I wasn't the one running out of time. 4 o'clock arrived with the quiet precision of a final verdict. I was still at the cafe, watching the minute hand climb, when my phone vibrated with a company-wide alert. One tap opened the message, the official statement from the board of directors, and for a long, suspended moment, the screen glowed with something I never expected to see written in SilverGate's sterile corporate tone: responsibility. The board announced a full compensation restructuring, immediate market rate salary corrections, and 8 years of retroactive back pay for all long-term employees. They committed to transparent salary bands, third-party oversight, and a complete audit of HR practices, the kind of sweeping reform that would have been unthinkable just 24 hours earlier. It hit me slowly, like warm water spilling over cold hands. The storm had broken, and I wasn't the one drowning. Messages poured in from former coworkers, some still in shock, some crying, all relieved. "Brady, you saved us. Thank you for speaking up. I wish I had your courage." Their gratitude came in waves that felt almost surreal. After 19 years of feeling invisible, I suddenly wasn't. Then came the next alert: CEO Henry Marlowe suspended pending investigation. A second alert followed: Connor Marlowe placed on temporary leave for performance review. Corporate poetry at its finest. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply stood, paid for my coffee, and walked back to SilverGate one last time. Not to return, just to finish the story properly. The halls were buzzing with disbelief and relief, but no one stopped me as I stepped into Henry's empty office. I placed one final note on his pristine desk, written on the same stationery I had used for my resignation: never underestimate the man who built the system you tried to bury, especially when it collapses on you. Then I turned off the light and closed the door behind me. Walking out of SilverGate for the last time didn't feel like losing something. It felt like reclaiming it. My time, my voice, my self-respect. I'd spent nearly 2 decades believing loyalty was a virtue, but the truth was simpler: loyalty means nothing when it's handed to the wrong people. And if my story tells you anything, It's this: your worth is not measured by a company's convenience. It's measured by the moment you finally choose yourself. If this resonated with you, tell me, where are you listening from? And if you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. There are more stories ahead, and I'd love to have you with me for every twist and every moment of justice.